It began as an ordinary evening in Spencer, South Dakota, a town of just 320 people far from Tornado Alley's highest risks. In exactly 3 minutes on May 30th, 1998, an F4 tornado would erase 90% of this peaceful community, leaving behind devastation that even the governor called a combat zone. What warning signs did everyone miss before such total destruction? The answer lies in the next terrifying minutes. Normalcy. Porch lights flickered on as dusk settled over Spencer, South Dakota. With just over 300 residents, the town moved at the pace of its own heartbeat. Steady, familiar, unchanged for generations. Main Street was quiet, save for the occasional pickup making its way past the grain elevator. Neighbors leaned on fence posts, sharing stories about the day's work or the stubborn spring heat. Children pedaled bikes along gravel roads, trailing laughter behind them. The post office closed at 5. The last letter slipped through the slot by a retired farmer who knew everyone by name. 50 miles. Spencer sat 50 miles west of Sioux Falls, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon. Here, the world felt distant. Emergency calls rarely broke the calm. The volunteer fire chief might be found grilling in his backyard, pager resting beside a sweating glass of lemonade, more likely to be summoned for a barn fire or a medical scare than anything more sinister. The town's isolation was its comfort, a place where doors stayed unlocked and the only rush was to beat the twilight home. Isolation. Evening routines unfolded with practiced ease. Families gathered for supper, radio murmuring in the background. Some tuned in to weather updates, but most trusted the sky and their own instincts. The threat of a violent tornado felt foreign, a problem for places farther south. Spencer's history was shaped by patience and self-reliance, not by disaster. The last strong storm had come and gone years before, leaving little more than puddles and stories for the coffee shop. Evening. As the sun dipped lower, chores wound down. A mother called her children inside. A farmer checked his livestock one last time, scanning the horizon for clouds, but seeing only the fading light. The water tower cast a long shadow across the empty lot where the old school once stood. Routine. In these moments the town's rhythm was unbroken, a tapestry of small gestures and shared trust, woven tighter by the knowledge that help, when needed, came from within. No one sensed how quickly that fabric could unravel, or how little time would pass before everything familiar was swept away. On May 30th, 1998, the air above McCook County carried a heaviness that most people in Spencer barely noticed. The day had started warm and muggy, the kind of weather that made chores drag and sweat bead on brows. By mid-afternoon, meteorologists at the National Weather Service in Sioux Falls issued a tornado watch at 3:50 in the afternoon, flagging the region for possible severe storms. The forecast called for a moderate risk, a technical term, not the kind that sent children running for basements. In eastern South Dakota, those warnings often passed without incident. Most residents tuned into farm reports or local news, hearing phrases like isolated supercells and potential for large hail. But few imagined anything worse than a hard rain. Above the fields, subtle ingredients were falling into place. Warm, humid air from the south, pressed against a cooler, drier layer, sliding down from the north. The boundary between these air masses, invisible but potent, set the stage for something rare. High in the atmosphere, strong winds twisted and sheared, giving any storm that formed the energy to spin. Weather radar began to pick up telltale hooks and bows, shapes that only meant trouble to those who watched the screens for a living. The right conditions for a major tornado were assembling quietly over the prairie, but on the ground, the signs were easy to miss. The sky darkened in slow degrees, clouds thickened, and the wind grew restless. But the town's routines held steady. The scene felt silent and ordinary. By late afternoon, storm spotters and chasers were positioning themselves on highways east of Spencer, tracking the growing cells. Two supercells split off from the main line, one drifting north, the other veering southeast and gaining strength. The dominant cell, fueled by unseasonably high dew points and rapid wind shifts aloft, began to rotate. In the forecast office, meteorologists watched the radar signatures intensify. But from a backyard in Spencer, the only clue was a sudden, uneasy calm. The tornado watch covered a broad area, hundreds of square miles, and the odds felt remote. Few in town saw a reason for alarm. The last time a storm like this had threatened McCook County was years ago, and it had left little more than downed branches and stories retold at the coffee shop. That calm felt like a sign, not of safety, but of the coming calm before the worst. As dusk settled, the atmosphere above Spencer grew more volatile. The sky carried a greenish cast, but the first drops of rain held off. The ingredients for disaster, moisture, instability, wind shear, were aligning overhead, silent and unseen. The warning signs were there for those trained to see them, but for most, the night still felt safe. The clock ticked toward evening, and with each passing minute, the gap between calm and catastrophe narrowed. At 7:55 p.m., storm spotters east of Spencer reported a funnel cloud twisting down from the darkening sky. The National Weather Service had already been tracking the storm's rotation on radar, but now confirmation came from the ground. A tornado was forming, visible on the horizon, its base broadening as it gathered strength. 27 minutes later, the storm's rotation intensified and radar signatures sharpened, tightening hooks, deepening shades of red and green. The data told a story of something violent and fast, moving with purpose toward a town that still believed in ordinary evenings. Chase teams had been trailing the storm for hours, drawn north from Ogallala, Nebraska, by the promise of a major event in a place that rarely saw them. William T. Reed, Martin Lysius, Cheryl Chang, and Keith Brown positioned their vehicles on Highway 38, cameras trained westward. Their radios crackled with updates. Rotation confirmed at 8:22 p.m., just a few miles from Spencer. The funnel, now fully condensed, hovered over open fields, its lower edge scraping the earth. Lightning flickered through the core, illuminating a column of debris already rising from the farmland below. In the chase vehicles, tension built with every mile the tornado closed. The team's video footage captured the funnel's steady, relentless advance. No erratic jumps, no sudden turns, just a straight path aimed at the heart of Spencer. The Doppler. On wheels mobile radar deployed by researchers clocked winds near 200 miles per hour at the surface. Meteorologists in Sioux Falls watched the storm's signature grow more menacing with each scan, the velocity couplet tightening, the debris ball expanding. By 8:37 p.m., the tornado's outline was unmistakable, a wedge of darkness blotting out the last light above the prairie. The chase team's cameras rolled as the monster loomed over the town's edge. From their vantage point, the entire sequence played out in real time, a quiet skyline, then a boiling mass of cloud and dust swallowing everything in its path. For those watching through a lens, the sense of inevitability was overwhelming. Spencer stood directly in the crosshairs. Inside the town, the atmosphere was thick and still. A few residents stepped outside, drawn by the strange color of the sky or the distant rumble. Radios carried warnings, but the urgency was lost in the static. No one could see the tornado yet, not with rain and dusk masking its approach. The only clear view belonged to those outside the danger, watching from the safety of distance and reinforced glass. As the clock ticked toward 8:40 p.m., the storm's energy peaked. The chase team's video would become a vital record, showing the final moments before impact. A massive, rotating wall of wind and debris bearing down on a town that, just minutes earlier, had been untouched. Every second stretched, every rotation brought the funnel closer. There was no question of if, only when. The countdown had begun, and Spencer was out of time. At 8:40 p.m., the tornado struck Spencer with no warning. The siren never sounded. For the people inside the town, the only sign was a sudden, suffocating darkness and a roar so loud it drowned out every other sound. In the first seconds, windows exploded inward. Walls shuddered and gave way. The Doppler on wheels radar, stationed miles outside the town, measured winds near 200 miles per hour, strong enough to rip roofs from their foundations and send 2x4s through brick walls like arrows. The tornado's core, nearly a mile wide, carved straight through the center of Spencer. Houses vanished as if they had never stood there. The water tower crumpled, metal folding in on itself. Main Street storefronts, places where neighbors had gathered for decades, were reduced to splinters in seconds. Power lines snapped and whipped through the air. Lightning flashed inside the funnel, illuminating a churning wall of debris. Tractors, fence posts, family photographs, all caught in the storm's grip. In basements and interior rooms, families braced against the noise and pressure. The sound was like a freight train, but louder, more violent. A vibration felt in the chest and teeth. Some pressed themselves against concrete walls, clutching children and praying the floor above would hold. Others found themselves trapped beneath rubble, the air thick with dust and the smell of splintered wood. For 3 minutes, the tornado erased Spencer's familiar landmarks. 90% of the town was destroyed. Out of 190 buildings, only about 30 remained standing in any form. By 8:43 p.m., the worst was over. The tornado moved on, leaving silence and the sharp hiss of broken gas lines in its wake. 6 people had been killed. More than 100 were injured, over a third of the town's population. The rest crawled out from under collapsed ceilings and shattered windows, blinking into a world they no longer recognized. The sky was still lit by lightning, but the outline of Spencer was gone. Streets were blocked by piles of debris. Vehicles sat upside down in yards where houses had stood minutes earlier. Survivors staggered into the open, calling out for family and neighbors. Some found only empty lots where homes had been. The scale of the destruction was almost impossible to process. In the time it takes to boil water or listen to a song, Spencer had been reduced to fragments. The force of the F4 tornado, confirmed by radar and damage surveys, had left nothing untouched. What remained was a silence, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the voices of those who had made it through. For Spencer, normal life had ended in less than 3 minutes. Flashing lights cut through the darkness as the first volunteers scrambled over piles of shattered lumber and twisted metal, moving through the rubble. The air was thick with dust and the sharp tang of ruptured gas lines. With the main roads blocked by debris, fire trucks and ambulances could only get as close as the outskirts. Most of the first rescuers were neighbors, men and women pulling themselves from basements, then digging for others with bare hands and garden tools. Cries for help echoed from beneath collapsed roofs. Every movement risked further collapse, but hesitation meant lives lost. The town's volunteer fire department, battered but determined, began to organize triage on what was left of Main Street. Makeshift stretchers carried the injured to the only clear patch of ground. With phone lines down and power gone, radio dispatches crackled with pleas for backup. Emergency medical technicians from nearby towns arrived to find homes stripped to their foundations, street signs ripped free, and no clear landmarks to guide them. Medical supplies ran out quickly. Bandages were torn from shirts, splints fashioned from broken fence posts. Governor Bill Janklow arrived before sunrise, stepping through ankle-deep rubble and the remnants of once familiar lives. He surveyed the scene and called it a combat zone. Nothing in his experience compared to the devastation in Spencer. Early estimates put the loss at $18 million, but the true cost was measured in what could never be replaced. As dawn broke, the scale of the challenge became clear. Rescue would give way to recovery, and the question of rebuilding would hang over every conversation. For now, the only certainty was the grit of those who refused to leave anyone behind. Only about 30 buildings stood after the storm, scattered among the ruins like stubborn survivors. For the people who remained, Spencer was no longer the town they recognized. The U.S. Census in 2000 counted barely half the population that had lived there before the tornado. By 2020, that number had fallen again, settling at 136. Streets that once echoed with voices and summer games now sat empty, grass pushing through broken pavement. Some families left, unable to face the memories or the daunting task of rebuilding. Others stayed, determined to hold on to the place that still felt like home, even if it had changed beyond recognition. Frustration simmered in the weeks after the disaster. Many residents questioned why the tornado siren never sounded, or why warnings from the National Weather Service arrived too late. Local officials pointed to communication breakdowns and outdated systems, problems that had seemed minor until the cost became clear. The sense of being off guard lingered, fueling debates in town meetings and state offices alike. The Argus leader ran stories about the missed warnings, giving voice to anger and disbelief. In response, South Dakota lawmakers and emergency managers moved to strengthen the state's defenses. By 1999, new building codes required reinforced anchoring and stronger connections for homes and public buildings in tornado-prone counties. Emergency protocols were rewritten, mandating faster siren activation and direct lines between weather forecasters and local responders. McCook County installed new sirens and backup power supplies, and the state launched a public awareness campaign urging every household to have a plan. These changes spread across rural South Dakota, reshaping how small towns prepared for the unthinkable. The lessons from Spencer would not be forgotten, even as its population faded. The disaster became a warning, one that echoed far beyond empty lots and battered foundations. Today, tornadoes strike with little warning in places once thought safe. As extreme weather events grow more frequent, no community is beyond reach. South Dakota saw F4 tornadoes in 2022 alone. The lesson from Spencer is clear. Preparedness is not optional. Sudden catastrophe is never just history. It can arrive without mercy in the space of a single breath.